My name is Anise, and my abortion story is a little bit different every time I tell it. I had an abortion in my early 20s. I was in a relationship that was abusive, and I knew that there was no way that I could bring a child into that environment. I was really lucky that I had such a supportive family. I remember my mom actually sent me flowers on the day of my procedure. And I actually felt really comfortable with the process of having an abortion. I understood a lot about what would happen because I actually worked in reproductive health and rights at the time. But one thing that I wasn't really prepared for was the stigma that I would feel as someone who identified as a proud feminist getting an abortion in North Carolina. I actually went to college in North Carolina, and that's where I had my abortion procedure. At the time, there was a lot of dialogue happening within our state about waiting periods for folks who are having abortions. So, in order to finalize your procedure, you would have to do a counseling session with somebody by phone or in person, and then wait up to 3 days before you could actually have your abortion. And so that process, even though I knew, what was going to be happening, what was expected of me, I knew that sometimes there would be protesters outside the clinic. Um, for me, as a person in an abusive relationship who was trying to leave, who, just really wanted to harness their own agency and feel powerful, it was really frustrating to feel so disempowered because of the way that my state didn't really want to validate my decision to have an abortion. And so, even though I had made this decision for myself, I still had to go through the process of having this counseling session with a provider and then waiting a few days before I could actually have my abortion procedure. I'll say that those few days between were extremely challenging. And I felt, almost angry. I'm really angry, not just at the situation that I was in, but because I didn't really feel like I was able to take full control of my own decision making. I was really lucky. When I had my abortion, insurance covered the procedure. There was a long period of calling back and forth to my insurance provider to figure out if they were going to be able to cover my procedure. And I was really lucky that they were able to do so. In the in between time when I was waiting on callbacks to hear what would be covered, listening to judgments from people on the phone, I was frantically calling around trying to figure out, what I might be able to do. Should I put it on my credit card? Should I call my local abortion fund and see if they might be able to support me? It was a pretty stressful time, and obviously the partner that I was with at the time was not by my side through this process. But I was lucky to have some very, very supportive friends who drove me to my appointment, got me junk food to eat afterwards, watched trash TV with me while I hung out in bed for a couple of days, and really ultimately gave me the support that I needed to leave that abusive relationship. I think it's important to share my story as a woman, a person who had an abortion in the South, a Jewish member of the community, because abortion stories, don't always sound so cookie cutter. And I think it's important that we, share stories from all kinds of people who are having abortions and really talk about the way that stigma and the way that, we're treated when we want to access our own healthcare and we're told that we have to wait because our local government doesn't trust our decision making. For me, I was always raised with the goal of healing the world. And part of that really shows up in the work that I do, but part of it really showed up in the way that I work to heal myself. Having this abortion was a big step for me in my own personal freedom and my ability to make decisions, move forward in my career and my life, eventually meet a partner and get married, and hopefully bring children into a healthy and loving Jewish home. I had an abortion in the South, and oftentimes it felt like the conversation around abortion when it was a religious conversation really was centered around Christianity, which is, a really important community in the South. But there's actually a lot of diverse communities in the South, including Jewish folks. And I think really this is an important conversation for us to be having, because there's actually a lot of beautiful language in our texts around abortion and menstrual regulation. And it's really frustrating that the stories are often limited to talking about Christianity and abortion. And I really encourage more folks in the Jewish community, more activists, to really be thinking about how we can support Tikkun Olam by joining these conversations with other faith leaders, with other faith communities, and including so much of our community's beautiful social justice work in these conversations about abortion and bodily autonomy. Especially experiencing this in the South, it was very clear that the conversation, really didn't include Jews. And then, of course, obviously, the conversation never was able to really talk about Jews of color. And so, being a Jew of color living in the South, it's really important for me to share my story. And I grew up in a Jewish home. My mom was an activist, and she was working on this issue in the 70s and 80s. And so in some ways, it definitely feels like inherited multi-generational work. My grandfather also, he was an obstetrician, and he would do tubal litigations for women who asked for them but couldn't afford them. And so this definitely feels like work that I've inherited and see as very much tied to my understanding of social justice as a Jew.